Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, Declan Goff hanging out with you. And thanks to everyone who has pushed us close to 9,000 subscribers on our YouTube page, youtube.com/scorenorth. And also the podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, scorenorth.com. So we are now, I don't know, half a week or so into Vikings full practices. Judd, you spent the day yesterday at Twin Cities Orthopedic Performance Center.
Hour and a half, I believe, yes.
Let's go through some camp notes. Now, they're not exactly letting you get the same access as previous years. You're basically standing on a perch like 900 yards away.
Yep, exactly right.
But you did
a grassy knoll, Phil. I'm standing on a grassy knoll.
But you did see, let's start here. The Cam Dantzler makes the play of the day on Adam Thielen. And it's the play that's being talked about also between Mike Zimmer and Adam Thielen. Thielen saying, "Hey, Mike, this guy's going to be pretty darn good." So, what did you see from your perch? And what did you make of it? We don't have a whole lot to go off of. We don't have preseason games, so plays like this are important.
My question, I guess, to start off with is we would be talking about the play because Dantzler made a really nice play regardless. But does it mean more? And my answer has to be sort of yes, because of the context of you don't have OTAs, you don't have a summer camp. You've got basically what's going to come down to padded practice-wise, limited time in training camp, and there's no exhibition games. So ordinarily, Dantzler's play on day one of full padded practices would be part of the equation. I mean, you wouldn't dismiss it, but you would also say there's going to be tons of tape and this cornerback competition, which, by the way, is for 3 jobs, not 1, Phil Mackey, that this is going to be part of it, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a small part. And I guess my question is it going to be a small part when everything that you do positive in competitive situations, because there's going to be so few before the Vikings play the Packers in week 1, has to be weighed differently, I think. And that sounds stupid.
No, I agree.
It sounds crazy, and I realize it's 1 day of practice. But the fact is, in a competitive session, playing against the first team offense, Kirk Cousins threw a deep ball down the sideline to his top receiver, and Cam Dantzler made a really good play. I think it has to be taken into at least a fairly comparatively large part of the equation, let's say, versus 2019 or 2018.
It is. I've actually always found it to be somewhat curious and even foolish how football jobs and roster spots depend so much on, like, if you flashed in the second half of the third preseason game, like, or even you see these kicking competitions where, all right, well, if he makes this field goal in the fourth preseason game from 44 yards, then he solidifies the job, as if whether he makes or misses that field goal has anything to do with whether he's going to miss 10 during the regular season, but you're just looking for things to make decisions based off of, right?
Yes.
So even when there are 4 preseason games, you're sometimes making a decision on this guy versus this guy. Mm-hmm. If Audi Cole picks up a fumble and runs into the end zone, like, well, Audi Cole gets the job because he flashed and picked up a ball that was on the ground and ran it in.
That was a great game against the Bills. He scored 2 touchdowns, man. Don't sell Audi Cole short.
Audi Cole was amazing in that preseason game and had an amazing flowing gold locks of hair.
He did.
So even when you have 4 preseason games, roster spots are being determined and depth charts are being determined based on small sample size chunks that really are sort of flukish in some ways. Mm-hmm. So when you take away those 4 preseason games, you have even less to go off of. So whether you should or shouldn't give Cam Dantzler more credit than he deserves for this one play, like, it is an earmark in their decision-making process.
Absolutely.
That play matters when it comes to him versus Gladney or him versus Holton Hill, et cetera. There's also some confirmation bias in that if the Vikings had, let's say, a first or a second round grade on Cam Dantzler, but the league had him slipping, it's confirmation bias for them that, oh, this guy that we had a higher grade on, we drafted him in the 3rd round. Now he's making plays like a first rounder would in these practices.
Which is what we possibly thought. Exactly right.
Yep. So I guess long rambling point longer, it's definitely validation for the Vikings to see him making plays like this. And even though you probably don't want to base your entire roster off of one practice, like, things like this matter when you don't have that many. You have 3 weeks of some practices to make decisions on guys, and this is a flashpoint.
Absolutely. All right. So, day one observation at corner as a whole, base defense. I have figured out the 2 corners whose job it is to lose. One is not going to surprise you. One won't shock you, but it's interesting, okay? So there are 10 corners on the roster, on the 80-man roster as training camp starts and practices start. The experience level is 2 guys are third-year guys, and they're your veterans. And they are going to get, from what I saw on Monday, every chance to start. One, Mike Hughes. If Mike Hughes can stay on the field, he's going to play a ton. The other, and this is why they kept him around, despite the fact he was suspended for a total of 8 games 2 separate times a year ago in the spring, is Holton Hill. Holton Hill is
that doesn't shock me, actually.
Right, but Holton Hill a year ago, I think a lot of us were like, okay, he was undrafted out of Texas because of off-the-field problems. I think he smoked dope at the combine, and there were some off-the-field things. Okay.
We've all smoked dope at the combine.
Come
right,
on.
but
Declan's smoking dope right
now.
But getting caught at the combine is the problem. It's not the dope smoking. It's the Percy trick of being caught because you know you're going to be tested.
That's
so
the thing.
anyway,
It's more of like a
it's a dumb test.
it's an IQ problem.
Exactly
there.
right.
Yeah.
It's not I don't care if a guy smokes pot. Just don't smoke pot when you know that you're about to be tested. Yeah. All right. So Holton Hill doesn't get drafted 3 years ago. He gets signed by the Vikings after the draft to a pretty good contract, a 3-year deal. He is now going into year 3. The maturation of this young man is paramount, not only to the Vikings, but to his future. Zimmer knows all of this. Zimmer also liked him enough to put up with the BS of being suspended for half a season a year ago. They are going to give him every single shot, and they should. Mm-hmm. In the nickel, it's going to be Mike Hughes is going to go inside. In their perfect world, Holton Hill stays outside, and now the question becomes, is it Dantzler or Gladney who probably plays at the other outside spot? And let me give you why it might be Cameron Dantzler. And it's not just the play that he made in yesterday's practice, although a very nice play. I guess I didn't observe this enough at the time, boys, but he took part. So he played, Gladney did, all of last year with a meniscus tear. He then took part in the combine with that. Pre-draft, he got it fixed, which is great. That's fine. But meniscus tears are not just a small thing. They can take some time to come back from. The Vikings set him out of practice on their first practice without pads on Friday. He came back on Sunday, and he was used, I think, sort of sparingly on Monday. My point is they're going to be cautious there. This is going to give Dantzler, I think, a really good chance to start in week 1. So in the nickel, which you're going to use a ton, I could see it being against the Packers. Dantzler and Hill on the outside, and Mike Hughes on the inside.
Yeah. I like putting Mike Hughes and Holton Hill in situations where, all right, you guys are the elder statesmen here, which is crazy because there are no 8-year veterans here. So I'm into that, and I like the way you've laid this out. I am curious if Gladney at some point becomes the nickel. Do you remember the Gedney pickle branding commercials?
Of course I do.
I've come up with the jingle.
Okay, go ahead.
Gladney, he's a Minnesota nickel.
Wow, you are on fire today between the Mackey and Judd line and this one.
Only like 5 people understand that.
No
Declan
idea.
has no idea.
Are you serious?
Right over my head.
Gedney.
I love pickles.
Is a Minnesota pickle.
You know, oh, wow. I thought that was around for a while.
No, I'm the only one. Me and
I
Judd
get
are
it
the ones
total.
that- okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Right.
I like the marketing campaign. I like the marketing campaign.
All right, other training camp notes, wide receiver.
Oh, that's an intriguing one because this is not going to surprise you again, and I think you're going to like it, and it makes perfect sense. Bisi Johnson is going to get a ton of work, and Bisi Johnson could play a major role here, and here's why. And to Spielman's credit, this is where he is exceptionally strong in the draft, right? Finds guys, especially guys like Diggs and Bisi Johnson late. If I'm not mistaken, Bisi Johnson last year was a 7th-round pick, okay? Bisi Johnson, and this is so overrated I could puke, is not a burner. He's not the type of guy, the 40 by Bisi Johnson. But you know what he is? He's football fast, and he's got good hands, and he's incredibly smart. And what have we learned? What's been the lesson from Cordero to Laquan? If you don't have the smarts to run the routes in this league absolutely pinpoint accurate, you probably can't play. Bisi Johnson can do that. I think there's a fighting chance that your deep threat, more often than not, in 2020, running the 9 route, is going to be Bisi Johnson.
So I think they're going to lean on Bisi Johnson as a safety blanket receiver early on. But I think in a perfect world, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are your very much clear-cut number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. I could see it as a situation, this is a little bit apples to oranges, but like Randy Moss didn't start a lot right off the bat, if I remember right, in 98, because he was kind of getting acclimated.
Yeah, it was Carter and Reed.
And then eventually, and again, you had like 2 Hall of Fame receivers and then an all-pro guy who had 4 years of 1,000 yards. But sometimes you don't just put the rookie in there right away. And I think this year more than ever, that's going to be the case with Justin Jefferson. He's not going to be out there for like 70 snaps in week 1. I would be shocked. So Bisi Johnson, who proved himself to be pretty reliable. He caught 6 passes in that Denver comeback last year.
Yeah.
Mostly in the second half.
He's in the right place,
and
man.
So he's reliable, but I think if he's your number 2 wide receiver, your offense has problems. I think he's going to be a really nice 3rd wide receiver safety blanket once you get past the first few weeks.
I think he might be your deep threat, though.
Bisi?
I think he might be your deep threat.
I mean,
I could see him playing that role. Jefferson is going to play a lot, I think, in the slot.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And Thielen's gonna play both. But I think Bisi could be, and keep in mind too, in 2020, you can potentially pass a ton. So like 3 guys are going to be important.
I mean, Bisi, I just wanted to pull up his combine stats here just to find out, like, how fast is he straight line? He's a 4.5 40 guy, so he's not stuck in the mud.
Right.
But that's not, you're not going to blow by a lot of corners.
But
so
let's not forget football fast. Football fast is good moves. Football fast is precise routes as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think we get too in love with straight line speed.
Also, I mean,
which
I will say
Troy Williamson had.
It's not like there's a ton of great options here on the depth chart for burners down. There's not like a Deshaun Jackson in his prime on this roster.
Correct.
That's going to go down. But I mean, Adam Thielen catches deep passes too. But that Stephon Diggs, streaking wide open 3 times a game, and Kirk Cousins throwing it down the field.
Exactly.
Who fills that role? It's probably Bisi Johnson to some extent. It's probably a combination of these guys. I also wouldn't be surprised if Justin Jefferson gets loose on some of those plays down the field and he gets targeted. So I don't think you're going to replace Stephon Diggs on those routes with one guy.
Right.
So
I agree with that. But I do think that this kid is going to go down as another really good wide receiver late round find by Rick Spielman.
Yeah. I mean, he already kind of is, just the role he played last season. Like,
they find
he's a
this
success story. Mm-hmm. So, all right, what else? Interior defensive line.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, this one concerns me. Yesterday with first team defense, it was not, and this is subject to change, okay? So it concerns me, but it could change quickly. Was not Armin Watts getting a shot inside. It was Jaleel Johnson, who's had a lot of chances at the, I believe he was at the 3 tech, and Shamar Stephen at the nose. And I don't see how this is going to work well. That nose position and the interior defensive line in Mike Zimmer's defense is paramount to its success, okay? The second thing is those positions in this league have just changed. Like, you've got a lot now of really good players there and guys that get push on quarterbacks. And I'd say the last 5 to 8 years, there's been an evolution at that position which makes those spots more and more important. Are you really going to do Jaleel Johnson and Shamar Stephen, who I think are both backups and probably can make a 53-man roster? But I just see the Vikings, if this is what they do, I see them getting gashed in the run. And I see them, and this might be the most important thing, I see them exposing Eric Kendricks to make it impossible for him to be nearly as good as he was in 2019, because there's no question that he has benefited from the fact that the guys in front of him in that interior line have been pretty damn solid.
Well, they got screwed by COVID. This clearly wasn't their plan going in. They didn't.
Could that be a band?
They didn't. Screwed by COVID.
Screwed by COVID.
It's a great an alternative rock band from the 90s or something.
From the 2000s, I think now.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be early 2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just they clearly didn't sit in a room back in March and say, all right, we're done with Linval, so let's just push forward with Jaleel Johnson and Shamar Stephen.
Yep.
They brought in Michael Pierce, and then COVID hits, and Michael Pierce opts out of the season. So short of Snacks Harrison coming in and shoring up the middle of your defensive line, I just did a quick Google News search of what's the latest on him. The latest is there's been nothing in the last week. 2 weeks ago, there's an article, Green Bay Packers reportedly offered Snacks Harrison a contract, but it's been all quiet on that front the last couple of weeks.
You know I'm all in on Team Snacks, Phil. But the Shamar Stephen thing, I don't get the infatuation there.
I don't know if is it an infatuation or is
give
it just
Armin
like
Watts a shot.
Well, Armin Watts will probably
give a younger guy a shot. I mean, Shamar Stephen's just a backup.
Okay, put it this way: Shamar Stephen of the 900 available snaps to these guys if they play 16 games, there's zero chance that either one of those guys is just none of them are Kevin Williams, where you're just going to let him sit out there for 800 snaps and you're never going to make a sub unless he gets winded.
But I'd rather take a chance. I'd rather take a chance on a guy who I'm not quite sure about, as opposed to a guy I know a lot about and he's a backup. That's my point.
I agree, and I think you're going to see him. It's the second day of practice.
I just saw a play, a check down. Okay, this just scared me. I saw a play, and it did scare me. Now, it's a nice offensive play, so I am applauding Kirk and the guy who caught the ball. C.J. Ham, the fullback. So it's a check down, and it basically went through the A gap. And it moved so quickly that C.J. Ham was on Kendricks before Kendricks knew what hit him. And the old school Vikings girth or the Linval girth probably wouldn't have allowed that play. It's not that they wouldn't have allowed that play to happen. I don't want to say that. But it was the quickness with which it developed.
Girth.
It was sort of like a tornado. It was on you before you knew it, and I felt bad for Kendricks because, I mean, come on.
Girth.
Well, this is day one of training camp.
Well, Michael Pierce, play the Rick Pitino game. Michael Pierce ain't walking through that door. Linval Joseph in his prime ain't walking through that door.
He's a Charger now, right?
The Williams Wall ain't walking through that door. Okay. John Randall from the
Snacks
90s.
Could be.
Jerry Ball ain't walking through that door.
Love Jerry, but Ted Washington, too. Didn't play for the Vikings, but a great fat guy.
Yeah.
Gilbert Brown, who the Vikings released before he played a game.
None of these guys are walking through that door.
Okay, how about Snacks? Snacks can walk through the door.
Snacks could walk through the door.
Anyway, those are my 3 training camp observations from the grassy knoll at TCO Performance Center in Eagan.
All right, like it. And
not the book depository, the grassy knoll.
So Judd with his binoculars trying to sniff out some of these camp battles.
I didn't take them. I'm going to take them next time, by the way.
So you can find Judd's writing, too, on scorenorth.com covering the Minnesota Vikings and other Minnesota sports. And also, we appreciate you checking out our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/scorenorth for Vikings content. For Twins discussions, and write that down, and for Action Movie Rewinds, Score North, or I should say youtube.com/Mackey Judd is our other YouTube channel. We have 2 YouTube channels. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time on Purple Daily.